answers, then you know.
4 students found each had multiple stab wounds. Some had defensive wounds, showing they fought with the attacker. And there was no sexual assault. County Coroner Kathy Mabbutt is describing the murders as personal.
All right, everybody. So welcome back to Watch the Obsession live stream and chat. And I'm so glad that all of you guys are here this evening. So welcome to everybody. Thank you for being here. Members, subscribers, people that are new to the channel, moderators, you guys are amazing. And thank you so much for everything that you do. Oh, this background is like not exactly what I was wanting, but that's okay. I'm just going to mess around with it a little bit. Okay, so gosh, we haven't talked about this case on this channel in quite a while. So I'm really happy to be touching base on this case once again. I know there's going to be such big news coming up about this case in the future. I don't know if you guys heard, but just recently, I believe it was this week, the date for the beginning of the trial was announced. And guys, it's not going to be for another full year from now. So the trial will be starting in summer of 2025, which seems kind of unbelievable to, well, a lot of people, certainly those of us that have been following this case from the very beginning. Doesn't it feel like this happened such a long time ago and that we've been grieving in our hearts and on our minds these poor victims, you know, for such a long time, and their families, of course, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. And we pray for justice for them, peace for their souls, and peace for their families. It'd be such a hard thing to find. Some of you here are already, you know, kind of indicating in the comments. I just want to welcome you guys by reading a couple of the comments here. Oh, why did I just freeze? Please don't freeze, StreamYard. Don't freeze on me, baby. Let me just do something here quick. And all right, that's a little better. That felt like a little bit of a jarring jump to the blue. I don't know. So, okay, so in comments we have, and welcome again to everybody who's here. I'm not going to go and say hi to everybody because you guys are all coming in. Everybody come in. I see all you guys, and I'm so happy that you are all here. Let's see. So, wow, chat's moving kind of fast on my end. If you need us to slow down chat at any point, I don't think it should be a problem, but just let us know. We can probably handle that for you. So Kelly Hansen, welcome, Kelly. How are you doing? Says, to Jen, you're right. Unless you've lost a beautiful child, you'll never know what kind of pain their parents are in. Oh my gosh, this is such a heartbreaking crime. Absolutely, Kelly. And I mean, I can't imagine. And for those of you that have lost a child, I'm so incredibly sorry for that loss. And people always say that it is the worst kind of heartbreak you could ever imagine. And that's, I can't fathom anything worse. It's hard to even go there in your mind, right? Imagine living it. Oh my gosh, these poor parents, these family members and friends that have had to wait. It'll be a total of 32 months or so until from when this happened until when the trial starts. I think a little bit of quick math. I'm not sure if that's right, but I'm sure it feels like a lifetime. Yeah, and Jen had said these beautiful people were someone's daughters, son, loved ones. Let's keep chat and loving memory with those thoughts. Thank you. Thank you, Jen. That's a beautiful message. Yes, we just ask, you are absolutely allowed to express your opinion here. In fact, on this channel, we want you to express your opinion. We're not trying to tell you to think one way or another. And, you know, that's what it's all about, is coming here together and discussing openly. But we just ask that you please be respectful to the victims and to their family members always. Yeah. So I picked up a couple other in chat here. This case breaks my heart. Hi, Nilda. How are you doing? Welcome, my friend. Yeah, it is so heartbreaking. I mean, these beautiful young people, it's just so hard to imagine what kind of insanity, what kind of motivation any monster could have to want to end the lives of these beautiful young people who had nothing but bright futures ahead of them and certainly did absolutely, I mean, nothing to deserve this. It's kind of a stupid statement to even utter, you know. But yeah. Hi, Sarah with a blue dress. How are you doing? It's great to see you. It says, hey, Kelly in chat. I followed this case pretty early on, but I know a lot has happened since then. So I'm looking forward to hearing your report on it. Hope everyone's enjoying the summer. And same to you, Sarah, with the blue dress. And I want to say red dress because the picture is the red dress. Oh, that's going to be, it's like a little mind game. And things have happened. Certainly there have been pretrial proceedings and things have happened in those pretrial proceedings that we can touch upon. But as far as, new information coming out about this case, there hasn't been too much of it because of that really strict and broad gag order that was imposed by Judge that has made it really difficult for any credible information to come forth. In fact, I think some of the most credible information that has come out from sources that know what they're talking about, and I don't say this about most cases because it's not the case with most cases, has come in part from this channel. Wait, I got to plug in my computer because we do have that amazing connection with the two students from the University of Idaho who have been a wonderful source and friends of the channel, this channel, since right after this horrible tragedy occurred. Just one second, I just gotta grab my power source here and plug her in. Here we go. All right. Ta-da! Man, the little luxuries, electricity. What would we do without you? Okay, so now perhaps some of you know, and this isn't the only thing that I want to talk about. I don't want to just read through Howard Blum's new book, although I think it is certainly worthwhile to do that. I just finished doing that read this afternoon, just a couple hours before the live stream started. But Howard Blum came out with a new book called, it's in the title here, As the Night Falls. I might be getting that a little wrong. I'll correct myself in a minute. He has written other books about the Idaho case. And in his previous books, I'm just going to come out and kind of talk about this. There was some controversy about how accurate was the information. A lot of the information that he had put out in previous books and a lot of the information that he's talking about in this newest book is in the context of, as I was reading today, I couldn't help but noticing how many times he cited the source. He tried to cite his source more times in this book than the previous, I did notice, but the source would be a family member told a friend who, is my source, however it is he worded it. A family member told a friend. So that's the way he's sourcing a lot of his information. And a lot of the other information, the way he's sourcing it is by saying, this is what was presented to the grand jury. So everyone is very curious about that because somebody that is sitting on a secret grand jury is sworn to keep the secrets that are discussed within those grand jury proceedings, hence the name secret grand jury. So for somebody to be coming out and talking about that to anybody, especially an author who's going to write about it, is something that we frown upon. So we aren't exactly sure what the specific sources are, but apparently there are sources out there. So today we're going to talk about what he has said in his new book, some of the new is what I wanted to air quote, details that he has come out with his sources, just as they were as I described. And I want to compare some of that to what we have learned to be true from the sources on the ground that What's the Obsession has, which are the two students who attend school at the University of Idaho who were good friends with Ethan Chapin and were friends with all the other roommates and knew them quite well and had very much to do with, seeing the victims and the other two roommates. Well, at least one of them, the night that was going into those early morning hours of the murders. We're going to talk a little bit about what they have to say. I've been in touch with them right along, sometimes more or less, but I have spoken to them a few times just in the past couple of weeks. So we'll get into that a little bit. So first, I want to bring something into the stream here, and let's just hear a little bit about what the author, Howard Blum, has had to say. I'm trying to stay away just from the Nancy Grace coverage of it because she's like, oh my gosh, this book, it's amazing, the detail. And I don't feel that way about it. I've got to be honest. I don't feel that way about it. But I want to see what you guys think.
A year and a half after the brutal killing of 4 college students, Xana Kernodle, her boyfriend Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Goncalves. families and friends still awaiting justice as a trial has yet to be set for Bryank Kohberger.
I hope people understand how all these kids that were a part of this were doing everything right. And they were going to be the type of people that you wanted to be your neighbor.
On November 13th of 2022, a quadruple homicide rocked the quiet college town of Moscow, Idaho, and the nation. It made headlines everywhere.
Now to the investigation into the deaths of 4 college students from the University of Idaho. There is news tonight, chilling new images.
It also took over social media with theories.
All right, this is what I think happened in the Idaho murders.
Unless you've been living under a rock, I'm sure you've heard of the University of Idaho murders.
As the victims' families and friends waited nearly 7 weeks for a suspect to be arrested.
The arrest of a 28-year-old man in Pennsylvania in connection with the brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students.
Now, new reporting about the murders detailed in a new book by award-winning author Howard Blum.
You come to the conclusion that based on
Oh,
your
guys,
research,
hold on
your
just 1 second.
interviews,
So sorry about that. Here, I'm here. Setting up investor hard occasionally and throwing with a lot of case. I'm surprised that happened now. Sorry about that, guys. On with the show. Let me just bring that video right back into the stream. Thank you guys for full attention. Let's go back a moment. Yep.
In a new book by award-winning author Howard Blum.
you come to the conclusion that based on your research, your interviews, you believe that Bryank Kohberger did it.
I believe that Bryank Kohberger did it, but there are 2 parts to that question. The first part is, can he be convicted in a court of law? And I think that's a much higher mountain to climb.
When the Night Comes Falling, based in part on Blum's early conversations with the Moscow Police Department before the judge issued a gag order shrouding the investigation in secrecy.
I was able to reconstruct this night when everything seems to fall apart.
It all began November 12th, 2022. A Saturday night in college, friends headed to local bars and parties. Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen, newly 21, went to the popular campus bar, the Corner Club, around 10 p.m.
These 2 girls were just there for each other.
Steve Goncalves is Kaylee's heartbroken father.
They went to dances together.
Yeah, just a good, wholesome friendship that you hope every child has. And you're grateful that they have that.
Investigators say the 2 young women left the Corner Club around 1:30 a.m. And by 1:40, Kaylee and Maddie were seen laughing and taking pictures as they ordered from a food truck in downtown Moscow.
I could just tell just by her body language that she was definitely feeling pretty good. And I wish I could have been there and given them a hug.
At 1:56 a.m., the pair arrived home. According to authorities, their roommate, Xana Kernodle, and her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, both 20 years old, were at a fraternity party earlier that same night, but also returned to that off-campus home by about 1:45 a.m. Hours later, all 4 were dead. The other 2 roommates were already home and allegedly sleeping. They were unharmed. Little information has been released to the public, but Blum's book now claiming to fill in some of the gaps that night.
In your reporting, you come to the conclusion that Maddie was the target in this.
The authorities, in their mind, are convinced that the suspect came in through the sliding door on the 2nd floor of the house. Right once you enter the kitchen area, there's a bedroom that Dylan Mortensen was in. On the left-hand side, the right-hand side was Xana's bedroom. If he was just on a killing spree, it would have been natural, instinctive to go to one of those doors. Instead, he goes up this narrow staircase and he turns directly into Maddie's room. And I think Maddie was his target.
Sources tell both Blum and ABC News that the two surviving roommates were using their phones to communicate during and after the murders.
According to testimony that was made to the grand jury, the two girls were communicating. They were texting one another, not just after, but at one point during the killings.
Sources close to Kohberger's family telling Blum his father Michael was on edge as he picked up Bryank.
Now, I want you to notice that point that he makes there about the Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk texting during the murders while the actual horrible activity was happening. And I believe that we brought forth the most credible information about that on this channel, having to do also with what it was that Bethany Funk, not just Dylan Mortensen, which is of course in the affidavit, but what also Bethany Funk was doing during that time, which I shared with you guys a few months back, which is right around the time I stopped talking about this case for a while. And really the reason is that, for guys, it's kind of twofold. It's that, yes, there are pretrial proceedings happening, and those things are important. They are something that we can look at and we can follow, but also the backlash that I received for covering this case, and particularly for having the two student sources that I had and talking about that became so severe that just kind of for my own safety and sanity, I felt that I needed to take a break from it for a while. So many of you have asked about that. The audio is roboting. Dang. All right. We'll just keep playing.
Ryan from school that winter.
He's been reading the headlines. He knows that 4 students were killed just 12 miles from his son's house. He knows what a troubled son he has. The Moscow police issue a BOLO, a stop order on a car that is a white Hyundai Elantra. He realizes my son drives a 2015 Hyundai Elantra.
And according to Blum sources, Brian's own sister approached their dad, voicing her suspicions about Brian.
What was that conversation like?
She's a...
Is the sound so muffled? There's totally no reason that that should be. It sounds so muffled for you guys. The video sounded good, and then Nina says, I think it's only bad when she's playing the video. Can you just give me some feedback on what it is while I'm going to check my settings here real quick? Okay? Give me 1 second. Audio. Oh.
All right, that should be better. Is that better? I think that should be better. I think when I had to restart my computer, it changed my mic settings. Is that better, guys? Awesome. All right, thank you, guys. Let's proceed. Sorry.
Instinctive to go to one of those doors. Instead, he goes up this narrow staircase and he turns directly into Maddie's room. And I think Maddie was his target.
Sources tell both Blum and ABC News that the two surviving roommates were using their phones to communicate during and after the murders.
According to testimony that was made to the grand jury, the two girls were communicating. They were texting one another, not just after, but at one point during the killings.
Sources close to...
Okay, now what I was saying there was, you'll notice that he talks a lot about how the two roommates were texting during the actual murders, which is just absolutely horrible. And I was saying that, and there's a point to this, I think that the most credible information was brought forth about that through this channel that was received from our two student sources from the University of Idaho that gave us an indication of what it was not only that Dylan Mortensen was doing around the time of the murders, because we know that due to the probable cause affidavit, right? But also what Bethany Funk was doing. And that is information that we have talked about on this channel. And I disclosed to you, and we can talk about it again if you want to, and it's still out there. But one of the reasons, that was one of the last things I talked about having to do with this case, is really twofold. It's number one, that, yes, there are pre-trial proceedings going on, and those are important, and we can talk about them and cover them and all of that. And I think it's very interesting to do that. But there was a little bit of a lull in anything really new happening, combined with the really broad and strict gag order that meant no new information really. And then also the sort of the backlash that I got for reporting on those details, according to what those inside sources had discussed with me, and everything that I vetted to the highest possible degree, was so severe, I just needed to take a break from it. But guess what, y'all? I'm back, and we're going to talk about it.
Kohberger's family, telling Blum his father Michael was on edge as he picked up Bryan from school that winter.
He's been reading the headlines. He knows that 4 students were killed just 12 miles from his son's house. He knows what a troubled son he has. The Moscow police issue a BOLO, a stop order on a car that is a white Hyundai Elantra. He realizes my son drives a 2015 Hyundai Elantra.
And according to Blum sources, Bryan's own sister approached their dad, voicing her suspicions about Bryan.
What was that conversation like?
She's a family psychologist, and she knows her brother has had problems. She goes to Michael, and she says, Dad, in effect, we have a real problem. I'm starting to believe that Bryan could be involved in these killings. And what does Michael do? He can't confront it. He just turns around and walks away.
Shortly after, police arrested Bryan Kohberger on December 30th, 2022. The Kohberger family not commenting on the claims in Blum's book. His former public defender in Pennsylvania, Jason Labar, saying, I find it brazen that such an esteemed author would publish a book based on multiple layers of speculation, assumptions, and presumptions, while Bryan Kohberger, veiled in innocence, has yet to have his trial. While Blum details Kaylee's father's tireless pursuit of answers, the Goncalves family telling ABC News they have never spoken with Mr. Blum about the contents of his book, and they call it fiction, a version made up by him relying on sources that have no responsibility or duty to speak the truth.
In May of last year, at his arraignment, Kohberger stood silent.
Your Honor, we will be standing silent.
Because Mr. Kohberger is standing silent, I'm going to enter not guilty pleas on each charge.
There's no real rhyme or reason for you to stand silent. If you truly believe yourself to be not guilty, then say it. If you want to take a plea, then say it. But standing silent doesn't stop the proceedings. It doesn't move it forward.
Investigators claim DNA evidence and surveillance footage, plus cell phone records, all link Kohberger to the murders. But his attorney maintains that he had no connection to the victims.
Kohberger has been held at the Latah County Jail in Moscow, Idaho since early 2023, while his team builds their case, claiming he's innocent.
When will the trial take place? That's the question that the defense does not.
Well,
Kernodle,
we do.
her boyfriend.
Her boyfriend. We do know that now. And again, the trial is officially set to begin in summer of 2025. So that is, of course, next summer. Let's see where I lost him here.
But standing silent doesn't stop the proceedings. It doesn't move it forward.
Investigators claim DNA evidence and surveillance footage, plus cell phone records, all link Kohberger to the murders. But his attorney maintains that he had no connection to the victims.
Kohberger has been held at the Latah County Jail in Moscow, Idaho since early 2023, while his team builds their case, claiming he's innocent.
When will the trial take place? That's the question that the defense does not want to be answered. Their strategy seems to be delay, delay, delay. There's a wisdom that lawyers often say, if you have the facts, go into the courtroom and pound them. If you don't have the facts, pound the table. Well, Bryan Kohberger's defense is doing a lot of table pounding.
A hearing next week could finally set a date for Bryan Kohberger's trial to begin.
And again,
our thanks to Xana. When the Night Comes Falling is out Tuesday.
Very good. Okay, so and again, that is it was just announced that the official start date for that trial is going to be summer of 2025. I'm going to bring another video into the stream. And this is going to be our girl, Nancy Grace. I know some of you love her, some of you hate her. She is a polarizing lady. Bear with. There's a reason I select these videos.
Kohberger's trial date is set.
Oh, Nancy Grace got the memo.
This, as the state is amassing cell and video proof. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. Thank you for being with us.
Bombshell. The Kohberger trial date set after endless delay.
Yeah, standing silent just means that you're not going to be pleading anything, because any plea that you could make, even if it's no contest, guilty, not guilty, could indicate something that you don't want to be indicated later down the road, especially if you don't have your defense all figured out yet, which clearly they did not. So that means then the judge is just going to have to procedurally put in, is going to have to submit the next step to the court for you. So Bryank Kohberger is standing silent and, things move forward. In this case, it has really no bearing on anything. It's just really a strategic move. Oops.
Not to occur at another year delay, seemingly no justice. And Chris McDonough from having.
I love Chris McDonough. His channel is The Interview Room. He is also the founder of the Cold Case Foundation, and he is a retired NYPD homicide detective.
Been a star witness in so many murder cases. The defense's best friend is delay, delay, delay. And that is a trial strategy, to delay. Agree or disagree?
100% agree, Nancy. And this is, what the family.
I just want to take this question really quickly because it is kind of interesting. Hazel Eyes asked, so he could later say guilty by reason of insanity. Well, if he had said nothing else after the standing silent lack of plea, theoretically, yes, he could do that. But once your defense puts out any kind of alibi or any sort of details whatsoever, like Bryank Kohberger's, what I believe to be rather lame alibi is that he was driving around in the middle of the night, out in the middle of nowhere, during the hours that those murders occurred, but not by, not by the house in question, right? Anywhere but there. As soon as you do that, you're basically, admitting to some kind of factual timeline that truly would preclude an insanity plea. But that's an interesting question.
Family was waiting to get a trial date, but to be 30 months out from the moment their child is taken off of this earth is very difficult to navigate through, and it does benefit the defense.
Another thing, I'm going to circle back to the trial date, but a big blow up amongst legal eagles across the country is the body language in the courtroom. Take a listen.
Integral to Bryank Kohberger's defense is the.
Now, I think this is very interesting. I would love to hear what you guys think about this issue, about the body language of Bryank Kohberger in general, but specifically what I would love to hear, your opinion on is the body language between Ann Taylor and Bryank Kohberger, because I think as a behavioral therapist, I have observed things about what they're talking about, whether it's the same or not, that I think are significant.
The appearance that his counsel truly believes he is innocent. Ann Taylor and her assistants have said that they support Kohberger, but body language experts say Taylor's positioning far away from Kohberger suggests otherwise. Some even say it looks like Taylor fears Kohberger. However, their attorney-client relationship shows improvement, with Kohberger breaking his usual stare during conversation with Taylor to crack a smile.
We've seen throughout history, and I'm going to go to Brian C. Stewart, a high-profile lawyer joining us out of this jurisdiction of Idaho. He is managing partner, Parker and McConkel. Question to you, Brian. We have watched the body language in the courtroom from the get-go. And let me show you a few shots just off the top of my head. For instance, oh, there they are on earlier court dates when they were still sitting together. That's one of the first court dates ever. The courtroom body language, Brian Stewart, is conveyed to a jury. It's nonverbal, but it's very clear. And we see Ann Taylor in the Kohberger case inching further and further and further away from Kohberger. Gee, I wonder why. Weigh in.
Well, there's no question that the proximity and relationship that a defense attorney exhibits towards their client gives the perception of what that defense attorney actually believes about the client, whether or not they're dangerous or safe or guilty or innocent. And even setting the defense lawyer's actual beliefs aside, a seasoned defense lawyer is going to know that that perception is always on trial, even in motion hearings as well as at trial, that they're always being observed and always sending a message of how they feel about their client.
Joining us right now, special guest Tracy Brown, body language expert, author of How to Detect Lies, Fraud, and Identity Theft. And you can find her at bodylanguagetrainer.com. Tracy, it's great to have you. I wanted you to see the various photos and see Kohberger with his lawyer. Tracy, I was looking actually at Kohberger's outfits in court, and I was comparing one suit to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and I noticed he always wore the same tie. And as I was looking at that, you know, does his demeanor change? Does his strut into the courtroom change? Because I will never forget Scott Peterson. Every day he would walk into the courtroom all puffed up like this, very cocky, like a star football player, and literally strut over to the defense table. And I didn't think that was a good look for the jury. But I've been watching Kohberger's gait, his demeanor, who he looks for in the courtroom. Where does he look first? How does he seat himself? Where does he seat himself? Is he relaxed? Is he smiling? There's a lot of creepy grins going on. But then I began to notice, Tracy, the distance. Now, I guarantee you after tonight, it won't happen again. But there has been a growing distance and frigidity between his defense attorney and him. And I'd like you, having studied his demeanor and his movements in court, to give us your assessment.
Well, what I see is when he walks in, he's super stiff. So either he hasn't been moving like while he's in jail, which is possible, or it's maybe a subset of fear running.
Okay, now this is where body language analysis, in my opinion, goes wrong. And as a behavioral therapist, nonverbal indicators of communication are a very important part of communication. They make up a large percent of our communication. Most of our communication is not, in fact, verbal. It is nonverbal. And we do know this, and this is true. But when people say, you know, the fact that he's walking in like all stiff and, you know, kind of creepy looking and stiff, it's either that, you know, he's not getting a lot of movement in jail, or it's some subset of fear that and no, it's not that or that. It's also possibly a number of things other than either of those two things. And that's what makes me a little crazy about some body language analysis and people who try to do this kind of thing. So we take it with a grain of salt, but it is significant. You just can't be so narrowing about it, because there really are a whole range of things that any nonverbal indicator could mean when you apply the specific context and some other known things to the situation. You can really drill down to gain more accurate meaning. But I don't feel like our buddy Tracy here is hitting the mark that I want to see someone hit.
Through his body, which that would be a reasonable thing to think. Now, as the distance grows, right, that says emotional separation. And they definitely do not have a close relationship, him and his lawyer. Now, here's what I noticed that was really interesting in some of the video that your team sent me is when they left the courtroom, the team he left and he got out of there, and the rest of the team was still back at the table. And that tells me that he has not necessarily accepted his lawyer as the.
Now that's something I noticed too. And she's going to say he didn't accept his lawyer as the unconscious leader, which I don't know what an unconscious leader is. I think she meant to say something else. But just what that told me is either he was not happy with the defense's performance, or, they still hadn't created that bonded relationship between attorney and attorney team and, defendant, which, is critical if you're going to have a shot at, actually defending someone in a case like this. Whatever the case is, the fact that he is not physically cohesive with his legal team is no bueno for him and the team.
Unconscious leader of the group, because if that was the case, they would rise and he would wait for them and they would leave together. So that really struck me as interesting. They are not a tight unit team at all.
I can tell you right now, this guy is never going to be allowed on the stand. Joining me, in addition to the all-star panel you've already met, Howard Blum is with us, renowned author and author of a brand new book, which is amazing. I read the entire thing cover to cover. When the Night Comes Falling, a requiem for the Idaho student murders. You can find him at Howard Blum. That's BLUM.com. Howard, you have researched this so diligently. I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, he seems to live in his own detachment, his own little world. Even in the courtroom, it almost looks, as he stares straight ahead, it looks as if he might have been drugged beforehand to keep him under control. But you mentioned that he wears different.
Now, I don't know of why all possibilities he chose to say it looks like as though he had been drugged beforehand. Why would you even put that out there? It just really looks as though he has a dead soul, lack of personality, or possibly utter fear. But I think it's more of a dead soul. But being drugged beforehand is not what I would have put out there. But I don't know. This is Howard Blum. This is our author. Oh crap!
Good.
Otherwise,
a little bit. Let me find
Suddenly gelled. He's looking good.
You have researched this.
She gives him so much freaking credit, and I'm just not feeling it. But I want to know what you guys think.
We know the state is paying for his defense, but where is he getting all these new suits? He seems to be going out almost posing as an actor in this. His hair is suddenly gelled. He's looking good. I think he's on some level enjoying this attention, because I also believe in the back of his mind, he thinks he's going to outsmart everyone. And he's just sort of sitting back there. I think the idea that his hands are steepled, showing confidence, I think he's really confident. I think he thinks he's going to have the last laugh.
Guys, we have been told, according to sources, he is using 5 different suits for court. Many of them look very similar. To Justice Scott Mogen joining me, professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University, author of Blood Beneath My Feet on Amazon, and star of a hit new series podcast, Body Bags with Joe Scott Mogen. All of that is well and good, but here's the thing about Mogen. He has investigated over 1,000 death scenes. Now, I've tried a lot of homicides. I've been to a lot of autopsies, but that is a big number, rivaled by Chris McDonough, former homicide detective. But Joe Scott, I want to talk to you about this aspect of the trial. You've been in a lot of trials. You have a real way of communicating. When I look at Kohberger, there's only one word I can think of: frigid. When he sits in the courtroom, he might as well be a stalactite sitting there in the chair next to his lawyer, who frankly she looks terrified of him. She hardly even looks at him, number one. And that's the thing. That is a thing. You know, Joe Scott, when you don't like somebody or you don't like what they're saying, you know, look away like that, or you won't look in their face. People can't meet your eyes all the time when they're lying. I don't see them having any of those moments where they turn to each other and speak closely. How do you equate Now, this may be a little out of your usual sphere that you talk about with me, because we were usually talking about body parts and blood spatter and autopsies. But I want you to compare the ferocity of those attacks on those 4 students with what we're seeing in the courtroom.
He has this cold affect, which I think that has been stated pretty clearly here. I was transfixed by what Tracy was saying a moment ago, and I've experienced this on scenes, and particularly talking with people that have this kind of absence, if you will, in the face of some of the most gruesome things that I think that are incomprehensible to most people. And I've seen this in plain view of me, because I would come away thinking, how in the world did they not react to what I had just stated to them when you try to describe these horrible events and the aftermath here? And he's staring down this, Nancy, what is it, June of 2025. He's got all of his time again to think about this. And the idea here is that he is cold and calculating, at least on the surface, it would appear. That scene that those
But how can
investigators
those two
walked
things
into.
exist, Joe Scott? The
Well,
ferocity, the
yeah.
vicious nature of the attacks, and the lying. I'm here to help you, he said to one of the victims before he killed them. And now this cold, austere demeanor in court.
Well, it goes to psychopathy, I think, Nancy.
I think it does too. I just want to let you know, somebody had just brought up something about Bryank Kohberger's passing, that he wrote when he was younger, like, I'm a piece of meat, I feel nothing. And yes, that is all true. And I just posted in the chat, I did a documentary about Bryank Kohberger. Everything that I believe was known about him today, I worked my butt off on it. And I think it's really good. I don't say that about my videos usually, but I think it's a really tight documentary. Only 7,000 of you watched it. So if you do want to know all about Bryank Kohberger, definitely go check it out. And I really tried to include everything that you guys would be interested in, or that just is relevant about him out there in that documentary. So here it is again. This is a documentary I created because I felt like a good documentary about him was absolutely lacking. I'm sorry, documentary. You all taught me how to say. So there we go.
Idea that there is something much deeper that is going on within him. Because I got to tell you, Nancy, when I begin to think about the scene and what we have, at minimum, what we've been told at this point, there was some degree of planning that went on. And we can get into all of that, but you think about the purchase of a weapon, you think about maybe covering himself, maybe covering the interior of the car as a barrier. This goes to a broader construct. If you're prepared enough to plan, to show up and do this kind of devastation, then wouldn't it stand to reason that by extension, you're not going to abandon that position? And only somebody that is really cold-hearted could do that.
Integral.
Now, I just want to address this. Some of you are talking about, Kevin asked a good question. Do you think his family is sticking by him? Do you think his family believes that he is innocent? I personally do not think his family believes he's innocent. And I think that even more strongly after I finished reading Howard Blum's book today, which, yes, I did read, and it's fine, but I'm not giving it the rave review that Nancy is reading. I can summarize for you in a few sentences what the new things are out there. He starts the book off from the dad's perspective. So this is kind of interesting from like a literary perspective, I guess. He starts the book off from Bryank Kohberger's dad's perspective, talking about that, coming out there across the country to take that drive back with his son across the country, back from Washington State to Pennsylvania. And this is where he does a lot of, citing. This is something that was said by the family member that was told to friends of the family member, and that's what who my source is. But essentially what he says is that his dad is fearful of him. His dad is fearful of the personality in Bryan that he knows that comes out, that is a know-it-all, that has no tolerance for what anyone else thinks, that becomes volatile and, fully lacking stability, and is a little bit scary. And his dad talks about, according to Howard Blum, deferring to Bryank Kohberger because of that very fact that he doesn't want to set him off. He's a little nervous of his son. His son makes him nervous. He knows he's in that agitated state because remember, Bryank Kohberger had just learned that he was not going to be returning back the next semester to his teaching fellowship, you know? And again, you can find all those details in my documentary on Bryank Kohberger. Check it out. So that's how it starts out. And then from there, the whole first part of the book is that. And then they go into when Bryank Kohberger and his dad were on that ride across the country, and they learned about the Kopaka situation. And, you know, the SWAT team coming in and him eventually being gunned down. And he spent a lot of time talking about that. I wasn't sure why. But that was like the whole first part of this book. Just a little FYI there for you. I believe that the family believes that Kohberger is guilty in their heart of hearts. I believe that.
To Bryank Kohberger's defense is the appearance that his counsel truly believes he is innocent. But body language experts say Taylor's positioning far away from Kohberger suggests otherwise.
The Kohberger attorney seemingly terrified of suspected Idaho students killer.
Not just evidence that is being amassed right now. We keep hearing the defense complain, I don't have the evidence. I don't have the evidence. It could be much as in the case of Alex Murdaugh. Remember the car satellite evidence, the black box, so to speak?
Oh, gosh.
That evidence was being amassed leading all the way up to trial. And therefore, it was newly.
Everybody, if you could just take a moment and please hit the like, I would really appreciate it. It helps out the channel. As you know, it invites more of our friends here. And thank you so very much.
Discovered is the state amassing cell phone and video data, much as we saw in the case of Fotis Dulos, who was charged in the murder of his wife, Connecticut missing mom of 5, Jennifer Dulos. That said, what about evidence that's missing? And how is the state going to counter, first of all, this?
One of the items in Kohberger's apartment sparks significant interest from authorities. A Dickies clothing tag is found lying on a Walmart receipt. The receipt indicates that Kohberger purchased a dark blue work uniform that cannot be located. If Kohberger wore the long-sleeve jumpsuit during the attack and changed before driving back to Pullman, it would explain why no traces of blood were found in the white Hyundai Elantra.
So this is a question that comes up a lot, and I know people are confused, and the trial hasn't gone down yet. There's lots of reason for confusion, but it is true that, yes, there was a receipt and a tag for this Dickies coverall uniform type thing in Bryank Kohberger's apartment, and yes, there is a receipt for the purchase of a K-bar military-style knife. That is in the evidence. That is in the evidence collection. It is, in fact, yes, it exists.
Investigators believe Kohberger then disposed of both the uniform and the knife used in the attack.
And not just that missing work suit, but also this. Listen.
Investigators have receipts proving that Kohberger purchases both a K-bar knife and Dickies work uniform, but neither item has been recovered. The morning after the murders, Kohberger drives 45 minutes south to Clarkston, Washington, situated between the Snake and Clearwater River. Kohberger makes a quick stop inside an Albertsons grocery store, and his white Elantra is seen passing Kate's Cup of Joe. Many have theorized that Kohberger disposed of the incriminating items during this trip, throwing them in the winding rivers that span more than 1,100 miles.
Okay, everybody, we got to circle back to bodies of water that we just heard. Our friend Dave Mack from crimeonline.com. The white Elantra is seen passing Kate's Cup of Joe. We know his route based on cell phone data. Right now, our authorities.
I did a video on this too. I think that the prosecution is going to be able to really nail. Oh my God, guys, I'm sorry. The cell phone data that is going to come out in this case is going to blow people's minds. And I'm so sorry to those people that are building shrines to Bryank Kohberger, McJay, and who else was it? I'm sorry, I just had you pinned, but you were just talking about that. That's insane. Yeah, and it's those same people is one of the reasons I stopped talking about this case for a while, because the threats, oh my God, for just talking about this case in what I, of course, believe to be an honest and factual way, or I wouldn't be talking about it, because we only talk honesty and facts on this channel. I mean, they are a hostile mother effing group. That is for sure. But the cell phone data that is going to come out, that's going to be able to pinpoint things about Bryank Kohberger's movements and actions at night that he never probably even thought, even with his, criminal justice studies and all of that, that law enforcement could possibly know about him. I think it's going to blow his mind for sure.
Furiously combing bodies of water to find A, the murder weapon, and B, that Dickie's uniform. Straight out to Howard Blum, author of When the Night Comes Falling, an amazing book full of intense research on Kohberger. What do you make, first of all?
This channel does not endorse that book in the same way. I think if you're interested, you should read it. Karen G just said, hi, Karen, how are you? That there's some other channels that are actually reading through it if you don't want to purchase it. I think there were a few new details. None of them blew my mind. And we'll talk a little more about that in a minute. We'll hear what he has to say here.
About this Dickie's uniform. I mean, the evidence is pretty strong in that he buys this uniform prior to the murders. Why? That's not what he wears to work. Why does he need that? What happened to it? And a clothing tag. The tag is found lying on the Walmart receipt. So we know he bought it. Where is it?
Exactly. I mean, this shows his planning, and he did not go into this just on a spur of the moment. This was a preconceived, deliberately planned event. And that also goes back to what you were talking about earlier about his confidence in the courtroom. He still believes that he's going to outsmart everyone. You can't find the murder weapon. You can't find the Dickie's outfit. All this is part of his plan that allows him to think he's going to get away with it.
Tracy Brown joining me, high-profile body language expert. I just want to point one thing out. I've got Jackie here in the studio going, why did he cut the tag out? Okay, I have to cut the tag out of every single thing my son wears because it scratches the back of his neck. That said, it could also be
maybe you don't want your tag falling off your clothing when you're going to commit a murder, because that would just be left behind as, let's call that evidence.
The tag off of the clothing. Like, okay, this is Walmart. You'll have not only a receipt, but there'll be a tag on, say, the sleeve. It could be that tag. That said, this is what I want to talk to you about, Tracy. The fact that the tag, this is so Kohberger, the tag from the clothing is laid neatly on top of the receipt. Who does that? I mean, who keeps those things together? I find that very, very unusual, but it goes to what Blum was just saying, the author of the new book, about the methodical psychopathy of Bryank Kohberger.
Well, this is the only way he can feel emotion in his life, right? This is his moment. This is his Olympics. He has planned and planned and planned, and he is going to make sure every detail is just right. Because remember, his amygdala probably not working, and he can't do feelings, and he's trying as hard as he can to feel something, and it's all this planning that is his moment to try to get something out of life for him.
You know what's interesting also, following up on Tracy, to Brian Stewart, high-profile lawyer in that jurisdiction of Idaho. Brian, have you ever had a client, and I'm just immediately thinking of Robert Blake and all of his henchmen. They actually made out a list, lie, tarp. They wrote the list, the murder list, lie, tarp, let's see, shovel. I can't even remember what all they had on their list that they needed to get rid of Bonnie Lee Bakley's body. But have you ever had a client plan so much that the planning became the proof? The lists, the receipt, the tag, the Amazon order for the K-bar knife, the Dickies uniform, just everything, turning the phone off ahead of time, then turning it back on en route home. It's just so much planning, and the trail to get rid of the evidence becomes the evidence.
Absolutely. I've never experienced that personally with a client, but when you see someone planning that systematically to avoid getting caught, that can become evidence that they did do it. When there's all this evidence, like the knife and the work uniform that were purchased but now have disappeared, and it's it is troubling, and he should be worried about it.
Joe Scott Morgan, you and I have talked about this fixed blade knife many, many times. We have the Amazon order for the knife and the sheath. We found the sheath under one of the victim's dead bodies, but the knife, of all things, goes missing. Even my son and daughter, my son got a Scout knife years ago. I can tell you right now where that thing is. Why would you buy a K-bar knife that matches the sheath under the victim's body, and now the knife is I knew you were going to do that. Thank you. Go ahead, and now the knife's gone.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk about the Dickies real quick, because that's key here, I think, Nancy. What if Liz and the crew could put that image back up of the Dickies coveralls? What's it missing that you would see on a normal pair of trousers? There are no belt loops there. Okay. Now, granted, it has pockets, but with K-bar, it has got a significant place here to run your belt through and to hang off of your pants. And I'm thinking, I've always kind of envisioned this, going into that room. It's almost like a drama that's being played out. When he withdraws that knife from the sheath, it's very dramatic, I think, for him at that moment in time. And in this fury, in this confused state, chaos, he's dropped this sheath. He doesn't have it secured to his side like you would normally think. I mean, hell, these things are made for the Marine Corps, Nancy. They have all kinds of places that they attach these things to their equipment, and in order to secure it. He failed in that one area, Nancy, and it's always been fascinating to me. And the fact that there's nothing in the car as well. He's thought about the Dickies, perhaps, to cover himself. And, there's been all kinds of theories put forward about, well, why is there no evidence in the car? Did he go to the extent as well of using trash bags or plastic or something contained? Because I just knew, I would have bet you dollars to donuts that when they got that car, it was going to be a rolling crime scene.
Well, dollars to donuts, by the time they did get to the car, we know that was in Pennsylvania. We know that the surveillance that was done in Pennsylvania and that was done on him as he traveled across the country found that he reportedly cleaned the inside and outside of his car without missing an inch for an extended period of time. I mean, still, certainly DNA microscopic evidence could be left, but it sounds like in this regard, in the preparation he did ahead of time, and then that time he had for cleanup, he was able to do that job, unfortunately.
That they were going to find some evidence in there, because I've worked cases involving
dollars to donuts,
sharp force injuries, Nancy, and they are by far, even compared to shotgun wounds, by far the most bloody scenes that you can possibly work as a death investigator. And
okay, so maybe this is a good time to add this. And I wanted Howard Blum to say it himself because it's something that's a little hard to talk about. But one of the only really new details that I found after reading his entire book, and it's not really guys, to me, I'm just going to be honest, it seemed a little sensational to me, almost as though this horrific detail was included because something sensational and new had to be included. And it is that, according to Howard Blum, what he asserts is that there is blood evidence to show that when Bryank Kohberger came into Xana and Ethan's neck of the woods, that Ethan jumped up to defend Xana. And of course, we all want to think of Ethan as being a hero, and he is a hero, and he's a wonderful human being regardless. And that the way that then Ethan was taken out was just one slash to his throat that severed the jugular. Okay. And then after that, the utterance that was heard by Dylan Mortensen, as we know from the PCA, it's okay, I'm here to help you, was then directed towards a very fearful, terrified, horrified Xana Kernodle. And as we do know, it has been leaked that Xana, and I do believe this to be true. But again, that's just my belief. It's like I've read the autopsy reports or anything. That Xana did have injuries that were consistent with defensive wounds, which is just freaking heartbreaking. But that really was, the big detail. And even if he didn't add that detail, based on, and I know we've talked about this before on this channel, based on the blood that we can see outside of the house and the positioning of Xana's bed, and the fact that the sources that I have, told me that Ethan was on the bed, or at least partially, and the way that blood was seen outside of the house might be indicative of somebody with a lot of blood to losing all of their blood, meaning an absolutely horrific, horrible, grotesque mortal wound. Even without that detail being stated, if that is true, we could have already known or imagined something very similar to it. And it just rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know is that's information that the families or anyone else needs being disclosed by a speculative author. What do you guys think of that? And I also find it hard to believe that he would have access to, details that were so critical to the investigation of the crime. Like there is blood evidence that is so specifically indicates that Ethan jumped up to defend Xana, and that is what happened. I find that personally a little hard to believe. And that fact being included in the book alone is what really turned me off to it, truth be told.
I cannot get past the thought that there was not an element of biological evidence left within that car. And we haven't even talked about shoes. What happened to the shoes as well? Because he would have had blood on the shoes.
Welcome back, everybody. Straight to Joe Scott Morgan. What do you mean? We haven't even gotten to the shoes. But hey, hold the thought. I got to tell you something very quickly. You just said, did he put things in a trash bag? How did he keep everything? How did he keep the car pristine? I'll tell you how. Joe Scott, you probably hear this before you fall asleep at night. Me saying, when you don't know a horse, look at his track record. If you don't know what he's going to do, look at what he's done. Howard Blum, remember when Kohberger was arrested in the family home near the Poconos? What was he doing? He was standing there either in shorts or underwear with plastic gloves on at 3 a.m.
Sorting his
and
trash.
He was in 2 separate plastic bags, right, Howard?
And exactly. And this shows the planning, the methodicalness that went into this. He thought he was going to be the criminology student who would outsmart the police. He thought even when he was in Pennsylvania, he still could get away with it. He would still be able to return to Washington State University and begin teaching once again. And I think even now when he's in court, he still thinks he's going to have the last laugh. He thinks he's going to beat this case.
Hey, Chris McDonough, Director, Cold Case Foundation, jump in. I think I heard you.
Wait, Nancy, let's go back to the clothing for a second, and let's just talk about the removal of the tag. And whatever, if it's the tag that's attached to the dickie, then there is a number on that tag, and it's called an RN number. And that number can be traced through the Federal Trade Commission as to where that item was purchased, where that item was made, what country, et cetera, et cetera.
And this is why we love Chris McDonough.
So if he had thought through this, this methodical, and if he was smart enough to cut that tag off, if the authorities ever found that tag, they could connect it to that item. But if they found the item without the tag, they may not be able to connect it back to him. I've had a case where I actually found the mall where an item was purchased. It was a jacket in a homicide that I had, and it was directly because of that RN number.
hold everything. Joe Scott Morgan, what he is saying leads me to my next topic, and I don't want to forget this.
Yeah.
What is the state doing? Because we keep hearing the defense say, you're not giving me the evidence. You're not giving me the evidence, because they're still amassing the evidence. And I was thinking more along the lines of cell phone data, of video data that they could get. Like we keep talking about the white Elantras spotted here and there. And I think they're piecing together a montage of where the Elantra was that night. But what McDonough just said about that tag, and we were earlier talking to Tracy Brown about his behavior, his stoic, severe, and methodical behavior in court. Who folds up the receipt and puts the tag from the clothes and leaves it on top of the receipt, and there it remains. But McDonough's saying you get that tag, that could be traced back to a lot, L-O-T, a lot. The exact factory that made them, where they were sent, what area of the country. He's right. Just what if? Just go with me on this.
Yeah.
What if we could trace back to that particular Walmart and catch Kohberger getting it, seeing him on surveillance video? I mean, and then what became of it? Where did it go? Just like the K-bar. Now, okay, hold that thought. And what about the shoes? You said we haven't even gotten to the shoes. Well, I hadn't even thought about the shoes, except he may have been wearing footies.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
could
like
have
in
been,
surgery.
or shoe covers. And if I could just for a second, I worked in the morgue for a long time, Nancy. I've participated or assisted in over 7,000 autopsies. You know what I always had on my feet? Shoe covers. And the reason you have shoe covers, and I don't want to be too graphic here, but there's a lot of blood spilled at autopsies, and it just saturates everything, super saturates everything. And the idea that he could have potentially have gone into this environment, committed this heinous crime, and from what we understand, at least at this point, it is very brutal. There will be blood evidence, if not on the bottom of the shoe, certainly on the tops. So what became of the footwear? You know, early on we heard a comment about van shoes or Vans that turned out, I don't know if they dismissed that or whatever the case was. I heard that there were people that occupied that house that had Vans, but I've always wondered about the shoes. Were they also tossed away along with gloves and this dickie and the knife in some area? Were they taken to the river and tossed in there, or is it, or the Albertsons, which I was kind of fascinated by as well? Why not just toss it in the dumpster at a grocery store like that, where it's not going to be tracked necessarily?
Everything that I've seen to date is concerning to me because it's exculpatory, and I need to clarify this. When all of the records are produced and the dust settles, and I have time to review it, I reserve the right to say, no, now I'm seeing everything. Here's what I'm seeing.
There may be a very good reason the defense has not seen all the scientific evidence yet, because the state is still amassing evidence. What is it? Will it be the nail in Kohberger's coffin for the brutal quadruple slay of 4 beautiful University of Idaho students? For instance, listen.
Since a broad gag order was enacted in the case, the public has not learned of any evidence against Bryank Kohberger outside of that listed in the probable cause affidavit. A search warrant returned from Kohberger's apartment revealed several items were seized that may prove damning for the accused killer. 8 human hairs and 1 suspected animal hair were taken from the apartment, along with cuttings from bedding with possible blood stains. Investigators also found black nitrile gloves and took a Fire TV device and computer.
Okay, Joe Scott Morgan joining me along with Howard Blum, Brian Stewart, Chris McDonough, and Tracy
Think for yourself, Joe Scott Morgan.
Brown. When we get through this, I want to go through video that Chris McDonough has made himself, going through the ins and the outs of the area. It's amazing. Everything falls into place when you can see it for
I've used this video before in videos that I've made about this case, and this is pretty good. And again, this is another reason I love Chris McDonough. Now, there's another major assumption that Howard Blum makes in his book and also in talking about this case, and that is that Bryank Kohberger, or I'm sorry, the suspect of this horrible crime, parked in that lot that was up at top of that cul-de-sac behind the victim's house. Well, according to the information that Watts the Obsession received from our inside sources, I do not at all believe that to be true. And I've talked about this in detail before. And if you guys are interested, we can go over that again. But I think to make that assumption is very dangerous because there is no proof that is the case. And I think it's going to come out in the trial that there is evidence showing that is, in fact, not the case.
Not to occur for a.
We've
I
received.
lost Nancy. Nancy, come back, Nancy. Nancy? Nancy? Okay, here.
At this point, it is very brutal. There will be blood evidence, if not on the bottom of the shoe, certainly it's in there, or is it, or the out.
The state is still amassing evidence.
Investigators also found black nitrile gloves and took a Fire TV device and computer.
Okay, Joe Scott Morgan joining me along with Howard Blum, Brian Stewart, Chris McDonough, and Tracy Brown. When we get through the
Think for yourself. Actually, the famous serial killer was BTK. And funny, Bryank Kohberger seems to have this kind of fascination with BTK, bind, torture, kill, Dennis Rader, that serial killer. And he took a college course, a master's degree level class with, can't think of her name right now. Someone help me out. Someone help me out. A professor who literally wrote the book on BTK. She did a series of, she had close correspondence with him and really knows the inner workings of BTK's mind. I can't think of the woman's name, but interesting that you asked that.
this, I want to go through video that Chris McDonough has made himself, going through the ins and the outs of the area. It's amazing. Everything falls into place when you can see it for yourself. I learned that out in Idaho. So Joe Scott Morgan joining us, Professor of Forensics, Jackson.
I completely agree with you, Karen. Karen G says, I think Brian created a hole in the national forest to dispose of these items so he can also go back and look at them later like serial killers like to do. You know, for me, it was a toss up between, tracing where he went after the murder and then the following day. It was either exactly as you're describing right there, or in one of those, fast moving waterways in the Lewis and Clark region of where he was. But I tend to, for the exact reason you're stating here, Karen, agree with you on that. Interesting.
State University, animal hair. Did I hear animal hair? What about the dog in the apartment? What if, just think about it. That animal hair that was seized matches back to the dog at the murder scene.
So, well, geez, why do you keep doing that? I'm going to get back to it. Anaphylaxis lets us know that the name of the person I was just referring to is Catherine Ramstead. And actually, some of you also are telling me that as well. Angel, thank you. Who else? Some rando, thank you. You're no rando here, some rando. And also something else I wanted to say was, the very first mystery novel that I ever read was Murder Under the Staircase by Nancy Drew. My mom had the whole collection of books from when she was little. I read them all. Nancy Drew's the bomb. Love her.
That animal hair that was seized matches back to the dog at the murder scene.
Yeah, wouldn't that be something? You begin to think about species, specifically breed. When you think about the dog that was there at the crime scene, there's a lot of people that have held that. Certainly, and I think our good friend Cheryl Mack has talked about, was there any contact trace evidence left for perhaps on that collar? how well was it secured at that particular time. But, you know, when you think about him, it goes back to Lacard's principle. Every contact leaves a trace. Did he contact that hair the dog is shedding? It winds up on his clothing. He goes back, or on him, on his hands, or somewhere. You never know. It could have contacted his face for all we know. Did he go back and then it was deposited at that location? All of these things have to be considered, Nancy.
Okay, what more evidence is the state amassing? Listen.
Part of the hearing on the 14th is to talk about the different parts of that video that we've received and how we need the whole context. This is the video that they say places this car near the residence. We've received little tiny pieces of that. And we think Bryan's right to a fair trial means the public needs to know that they've withheld the audio from a great portion of that, and that it starts a long time before the little clip that we've received.
The little clip that we've received. Okay, control room, could I get you to roll Chris McDonough's video, his drive-through all around the area where the crime was committed? Okay, you're seeing an incredible view here, and it goes all the way back to the gas station where the launcher was first spotted. Okay, Chris, go ahead and explain what we're seeing right now.
So what we're seeing here, Nancy, is the road that runs parallel to the residence. And you could obviously see this was taken on Thanksgiving Day. The police had still had this area secured. And then this is behind the house, looking to the neighbors to the left, which if you were looking at the back there, one area that struck me here is this window here. Underneath that window, there is a like a cinder block. You can see it right there. My initial impression was if this guy was, you know, pre-incident surveillance of this house and he had these tendencies like a peeping Tom, is he using that almost like a bench?
Now, the person speaking is Chris McDonough, the creator of the YouTube channel, The Interview Room. He is also the founder of the Cold Case Foundation and a retired veteran NYPD homicide detective. And I think he's awesome.
Right, to sit there, to look through the windows, those types of things. And of course, that's just a theory. We don't know that. But at the same time, I always thought this was the most logical area that this guy would make the entry into the house through that sliding glass door on the back patio.
You also have, oh, that's a really good video right there. And that is where I stood behind the house at night. Looking into, somebody left a light on in the home, and I could see very clearly into the home. Yep. And also the video that you amassed also of the drive-through through the area in the snow, and you went very...
I just have to ask, has anyone else noticed how much Nancy Grace really enjoys the word amassed this evening? Like, she just can't say it enough.
Slowly up and down all the winding streets. And I recall seeing the gas station over on the left of your video, which leads me, there you go. There we are driving beside the gas station, and then you turn left and start a circuitous wind up hills to get to the King Road address. Chris McDonough, that leads me to the car. That's where the clerk was when the car whizzed by, and we got that video. Now, I believe, Chris, that there's going to be a montage of video evidence placing that Elantra all around the area. For instance, we heard that he stopped into Kate's Cup of Joe. Is he on video? Is his car on video? And I think the state is going to put together a montage of video that's not ready yet because they're still amassing it. What about it?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Nancy. There is so much work that still needs to be done, and you've been there. You stood, you know, where I stood and looked into that house, and he is. Remember, we forget that his background was to kind of teach the police about technology. So I would submit at this point, the authorities are going, okay, this guy thinks this way. So what kind of risk is he going to lower for himself to commit this crime correctly? And if you drive through the town itself, there are videos on those businesses all over the place. Evident of the fact we have the victims walking back from the bar and they're caught on video. Well, I would submit to you, he is aware of all of those pieces of potential evidence that could throw him under the bus. And the car in of itself, the Idaho Department of Transportation would have access to a lot of cameras. I know there's been some, according to some of the information that I've received, that he's not on a whole bunch of stuff, and the stuff that they're showing us today, they're pretty solid in their feeling that this is him traveling through those roads.
I guarantee you by trial time, there's going to be a video montage of Kohberger on his route, leaving the house, driving to the house, and that white Elantra is going to pop up in multiple videos. Also, that leads me to the conclusion that authorities are looking along that route right now for the murder weapon.
As Bryank Kohberger's trial approaches, Ann Taylor will do everything she can to take the death penalty off the table. Many predict that Taylor will use the same tactics cult mom Lori Vallow's team employed to escape the death penalty. In Vallow Daybell's case, prosecutors were barred from pursuing the punishment when the court found they had failed to turn over all discovery to the defense. Ann Taylor may argue that the cell phone data collected by investigators is unreliable and attack the DNA found on the knife sheath.
We know those attacks are going to happen on the evidence, but will Ann Taylor take a page out of cult mom Lori Vallow's lawyers and claim discovery wasn't handed over in time and therefore the death penalty must be taken off the table? What evidence is it that the state is amassing? Trial strategy. Straight out to Howard Blum joining us, author of When the Night Comes Falling. What do you make of what you are hearing tonight?
Well, what I've been hearing all along is that the state has been deliberately delaying things. I mean, the defense has a very good case.
Never mind.
The state has taken way too long to amass all this evidence. You correctly point out that there is
Did you not hear anything we're saying? The state is very likely still amassing evidence as we speak. So how can they hand it over when they don't have it yet?
I disagree. How long does it take to amass all this evidence? We're talking about a year and a half on an important case, and they have all this task force working, plus the feds, and they can't get it together in time. They are dragging their heels. They're not showing the professionalism necessary to move this case forward.
Let's go forward with that. Brian C. Stewart, I know you've tried a lot of cases, but I have had cases where there actually was newly discovered evidence. And if you're talking about using satellites or amassing video from different stores, still looking for the murder weapon, still trying to triangulate cell phone data, I mean, that takes a long time. I mean, I understand people that are not familiar with the technicalities of amassing cell phone data and video data. It doesn't happen overnight, Brian.
Absolutely. And we don't know that they are still amassing more cell phone data or DNA data or surveillance data, but they said that they've turned over everything that they have to date. And even if they have done that, they'll continue to investigate and try to run down loose ends all the way until trial.
Well, bottom line, Chris McDonough, based on your drive-through that we've been showing, they have a lot of territory to cover. If they're looking for video of that Elantra, agree, disagree?
Yeah, absolutely. 100% I agree that they're looking for video of that data and they have to connect those dots back to him. So, yeah, the investigation's still fluid. It's moving.
Joe Scott Morgan, just in one last example, a data dump of all the cell phones that were in use in that area at that time. Now, we know he cut his cell phone off, but leading up to that and immediately following that, how long does that take to amass? Thousands and thousands of cell phone entries.
A mask.
It doesn't take this long, and that's the big ask here. I don't understand why it has taken so long relative to the digital data and also any of the CCTV data. I'm closer to understanding
Were
that
you
because they
not
might be
watching the
doing
Alex
video.
Murdaugh case? Were you and I watching two different trials when Alex Murdaugh was prosecuted for double murder? Because the state started trying day one to get the nav system data out of Alex Murdaugh's car, and they went round and round. I think it was with GM, what they went through. I mean, can you imagine taking on GM to get that data? How do I know that's not what they're looking at right now? I don't think they're dragging their feet. I think they're still working furiously.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're dragging their feet. However, I don't understand why it is taking so long. And with the Elantra, if there's a system on board in this
I know why it's taking so long, because they're amassing evidence, obviously.
particular model, how long does it take to process all of that data? And they might be trying to correlate it also with the cell data that they have.
Of course they
Nancy?
are.
Yeah, jump in.
Just a real quick thought to dovetail into Doc Morgan. I think there's a semantics here of necessarily understand. They have amassed the data. It's processing the data that takes all the time, and that's what the delay is. I would submit.
We wait as justice unfolds. And now we remember American hero, police officer Gonzalo Carrasco, Selma PD, California, just 24, shot and killed in the line of duty. Survived
So horrible. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt that.
by grieving parents, Gonzalo and Veronica, and his soon to be born son, Gonzalo. American hero, Officer Gonzalo Carrasco Jr.
Oh my. Well, what have we learned? We have learned that Howard Blum has amassed a whole lot of bullshit to no. I'm not saying that. No, I don't know what I'm saying about Howard Blum. Whoops. Ah. Hello. Oh, hello. Hello. This fish. That's funny. I've amassed 99 problems and true crime is 95 of them. That's really funny. But as far as the new book goes, Nancy Grace, and I heard a couple other people giving it these great reviews. Again, I didn't think that there was anything that was that stunning. Some of you said you feel that it is going against the gag order. I guess that is yet to be seen. We do know that Steve Goncalves does not like Howard Blum, and I think that Nina, you said that you believe it's because he thinks that Howard Blum is, just putting things out there to be sensationalistic, to sell copies of his book, which very well might be the case. I wanted to play for you this is a video I put out a while back. Probably is one of my most watched videos on this. So I don't know, case 11 months ago, and it's called Idaho Survive. Well, new at the time. It was new at the time because it was my research compilation at the time. Surviving roommates activity after murders confirmed by multiple sources. So in claiming, that we have this new information, because that's one of the things he was claiming in the book about Dylan Mortensen and Bethany's communications during the time of the murder, when this tragedy was happening, when the assailant was in their house. This ain't nothing new, baby. I just want to play a little bit of that for you, because I think this is all going to go down. This is all going to go down in trial. With the testimony of these roommates, Bethany Funk is going to talk about what her experience was that night, which is, I know it's not exculpatory. I don't think that the defense has any exculpatory evidence, to be honest. I don't think they do at all, my personal opinion. Certainly not from Bethany Funk, because as I shared with you, according to my student sources at the University of Idaho, what Bethany's Funk experience was that night, she and Dylan were, yes, on the phone, texting, not calling, or however they use, texting communication, whether that's probably just texting each other. I'm not sure though, but not calling each other, typing, texting. That Bethany Funk saw out of her first floor bedroom window somebody walking from the side of the house around into the what would be in the front to her purview, you know, that like parking lot area that's in front of the house. Now, remember, at the time, there were all those vehicles parked there. That occurred to me after I explained this to you before, and then I decided I wasn't going to talk about it for a while, that we didn't discuss this scenario, taking that into account. And I think a lot of people are thinking of it as being an empty parking lot, because we see pictures of it mostly like that now. But the person that she saw walking from the side of the house and around the front from her purview, and then across and down, which makes me believe pretty strong, very strongly, that the assailant did not park behind 1122 King Road, but rather off to one of those side streets a little bit. And that person that Bethany Funk saw that was alarming to her matched the same description of the person that Dylan Mortensen saw from Dylan's perspective, the person that was inside the house that walked by her, and then to those back doors, as we all know from the PCA. And the reason it was alarming was because Bethany and Dylan were in contact with each other. Dylan described what she saw. It alarmed her for a number of reasons that put it all into context. And then Bethany was like, oh my God, I'm seeing someone with the same description walking really close to our house from the side of our house and, you know, across, like he's leaving our house. And they realized, they felt like they were seeing the same suspect person that was inside of their house. Dylan saw that person inside. Bethany saw that person outside. Dylan saw that person, it sounds like, from a profile front, like in all angles of, you know, of him. And Bethany just saw him from a kind of profile and behind perspective. And then, you know, the question is, of course, why was 911 not called until 8 hours later? And, you know, the reason that I think that that would be was that neither of them wanted to be like that terrified, like, oh my God, something horrible just happened in our house. I certainly do not believe by any stretch of the imagination that they thought that all of the people in their house were dead and had been murdered. And so they kind of, you know, do what we do when we're trying to talk each other down from that like heightened state of agitation and fear. You console each other and you sort of reason it down to a level that your psyche can handle, so you can move on or go to sleep or whatever it is you're going to be doing. With all that in mind, I want to bring this video into the stream here and see what you guys have to say about it. So I think this is what the real news is. But I put this out 11 months ago, but it might be new to some of you. And if it's not, I'd still like to know what you think about it anyhow.
According to an affidavit, Funk was in a first-floor bedroom of the apartment house during the early morning of the murders on November 13th. A criminal investigator for Kohberger's defense writes that Funk has information that is, quote, exculpatory to the defendant, and adds it's, quote, unique to her experiences and cannot be provided by another witness.
One thing back to the affidavit that I think a lot of people were surprised by was the fact that one of the roommates was awake when the killer walked by, and that the 911 call wasn't made until hours and hours later.
A source close to the victims' families has told me that Bethany never, ever emerged from the basement room. Like, she never came upstairs.
So many questions are asked about the surviving roommates of the IDAHO4 tragedy, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk. From my perspective, questions from all of you and also in my own mind pertain primarily to Dylan Mortensen. And I think that is because what we've learned through the probable cause affidavit, we know certain things that Dylan Mortensen saw, things that she heard, and we get a sense of the apprehension and trepidation she was. I'm sorry, I was thinking about that. Did you guys want to do more of a summary of what we just watched before moving on to anything different? We just said that here. Nina said she'd like to do a summary of what we had watched. Do you guys want to do that first? I was thinking about that, but then I just kind of launched into this. Well, I just started playing it, so I'm going to keep playing it, then we can summarize. Experiencing on that evening when she looked out her door on 3 different occasions. The words that she believes that she heard were troubling. Things like Kelly Goncalves saying, I think somebody's here. And then hearing Xana crying, and then hearing a male voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," clearly alarmed her because at the end of the day, she claimed she was in a frozen shock phase. You may have seen I posted a video just a few days ago that talks about the 5 common responses that human beings have to extreme fear, shock, and trauma, the 5 F's as we call them, and human beings don't have a choice. So Carla, this is a video I made. I'm a behavioral therapist talking about this, this idea that, Dylan says she was in a frozen shock phase. And, people have a hard time, resolving that in their mind. And I do too. I mean, I can't wait to hear what the explanation is. I'm not saying that it's easy to understand, but we do know that aside from just being frozen from fear, these are the 5 different physiological responses that people have to shock and trauma, and they are completely involuntary. That's all I can say about that. Friend, freeze, flop, fight, and flight. Over how they react to extreme fear, shock, or trauma when we encounter it, because it is our survival instinct that takes over and guides us through that. It's really an involuntary response. Nevertheless, there are questions that remain about what happened that evening after specifically Dylan Mortensen heard and saw certain things. And of course, there is the big question, why the 8-hour time lapse between when the tragedies occurred and when 911 was finally called. This video is going to go over what we do know about Dylan Mortensen's experience and what the victims' families might know and what they themselves have asked about her experience. So come on in closer, everybody. Let's gather around the WotC Obsession Storytime Campfire. I'm going to explain a few things to you in detail. They are pieces of the puzzle that are corroborated and that make good sense and that finally start to paint a more clear picture of why that 911 call was so delayed, or at least what was happening during those 8 hours. Rather recently, a little less than 4 weeks ago, Mrs. Goncalves, Kaylee's mother, contacted a channel called The Drunk Turkey Show and shared with the creators some details of her experience and what she knows from the perspective of the victims' families. Now, I want to be clear on the details of how certain information came about. So, Christy Goncalves did not herself speak. She spoke to Daniel, the creator of the Drunk Turkey Show, or one of the creators, and he then relayed to us through a live stream what she said and what Christy Goncalves had to say about Dylan Mortensen's actions that evening was a shocking confirmation. Now, before I go on to share those details, I do need to say that the creators of the Drunk Turkey Show decided to take that live stream down shortly after it aired. And I'm not sure what was done with it after that, and it's not saying anything whatsoever about them. I was just trying to explaining the facts of how the story came to be to you guys. So that's all I have to say about that. Was very interested in hearing the details of what Daniel had to say about what Christy told him, because at the time I was very focused on making sure that y'all knew that this false narrative that told people that lots and lots of students knew about the tragedy. Oh, that narrative burnt my ass, as you all know. Unless you're new here, then welcome. And you should know that narrative burnt my ass and still does. Hours before 911 was called was not true, not accurate at all. And the reason that is important to me is because it's important to the Chapin family, and it's important to a couple students in particular that I've become close with over the past 7 months in talking about this case. But as far as they tell it, it's important to a lot of students who don't want the world to think that they all knew that their friends were in that house dying or having lost their lives already, and they, the students, didn't do a damn thing about it. It's also important to me because the truth is important to this channel. So, in talking to the Drunk Turkey Show, Mrs. Goncalves makes a reference to the probable cause affidavit and the estimated time of the attack according to the probable cause affidavit. 5 pages into the PCA, following the section where the author of the PCA talks about the statements that Dylan Mortensen made to investigators that describe what she heard and saw, this is said regarding the time of the attacks. The combination of Dylan Mortensen's statements to law enforcement, reviews of forensic downloads of records from Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen's phone, and video of a suspect as described below leads investigators to believe the homicides occurred between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. So, what Kaylee's mother shared with Daniel from the Drunk Turkey Show that she had not spoken about before, and surprisingly, neither had her husband Steve, was that she had been made aware that after Dylan Mortensen saw that figure clad in black and heard all of the things she heard and was, according to her, in a frozen shock phase, she called all of the roommates in the house to check up on them to see what was going on, if they were okay, because obviously she was very alarmed. I'm going to play a short clip, and this is the creator, Jules of All Trades True Crime, stating her opinion about what we're talking about right now. And I think she states her opinion very clearly and candidly, for sure.
None of that is in the little recap. And that's very curious to me because the information about the roommates is drastic. And it's not just about if they're talking to the victims' families or not. It was also said that Christy heard that the reason why the 4:25 a.m. time slot is on the PCA is because Dylan was calling all of the roommates. So that's proof right there that she was not in no crazy shock phase where she couldn't fathom to do anything but stand there in complete, oh my God. She had the ability to call several people's phone numbers. Didn't call 911 though. So you can dial all them digits, but you can't dial 3 of them. That doesn't make sense.
Christy Goncalves said that she came to know that the estimated time of the attack in the probable cause affidavit was largely due to the records from Dylan's phone and her contacting all of the roommates in the house at a certain time. So that most likely was right before 4:25, hence the time frame that investigators narrowed it down to, with the attacks being between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. Of course, with these other 2 pieces of information that they mention. Now, I think it is very interesting that in the probable cause affidavit, they say that they determined the likely time of the attacks due to these 3 things. And how interesting is this? So these 3 factors are: number 1, Dylan Mortensen's statement to investigators; number 2, forensic downloads of Dylan and Bethany's phones; and number 3, videos of a car in the area that appeared to be driving around in an unusual way or pattern. And we've learned some details about that. So you have to ask yourself, what is it about each of these 3 items that allowed investigators to zoom in on that time frame from 4 a.m. to 4:25 a.m. as being the likely time of the attacks? Well, I think number 3, the videos of the car in the area moving around, I think that one is rather obvious. So let's look at number 1 and number 2. Number 1, Dylan Mortensen's statements to investigators. So we know what Dylan said that caused investigators to perhaps start that time frame at 4 a.m. According to the PCA, it is said that Dylan told investigators that she woke up around 4 a.m. because she heard certain noises, right? But is it also something in Dylan's statements that we do not know that caused them to close out that time frame at 4:25 a.m.? Or number two, looking at the idea of it was in part the forensic downloads of Dylan and Bethany's phones that allowed them to zero in on the time frame 4 a.m. to 4:25 a.m. So we can certainly surmise that there must have been activity on Dylan's phone that helped them to determine that time frame. But look, also Bethany's phone. I mean, what Christy Goncalves shared with the Drunk Turkey Show, that we learned that Dylan Mortensen contacted all of the roommates after she knew that something was very strange and she saw the man clad in black with the bushy eyebrows. That makes sense that if Dylan Mortensen was texting or calling everybody, it would have been the forensic download of her phone that gave them an indicator of this time frame. But they specifically also mentioned Bethany's phone. So what is it about Bethany's phone, or that is on Bethany's phone, that helped them to zero in on that time frame of 4 a.m. to 4:25 a.m.? Everything in this probable cause affidavit, and any probable cause affidavit, should be very accurate and intentional. So if it wasn't very intentional to include Bethany's phone in the criteria that was used to narrow down the time frame of the likely attacks, her name would not be here. Inspired by Suspicious, I just put up a poll asking which roommate are you most eager to hear from in the upcoming start date of summer 2025 trial of State of Idaho versus Bryank Kohberger. Is it Dylan Mortensen or Bethany Funk? Or maybe you're like, huh? Then you're going to answer who? So because it has to be a yes/no poll question, Dylan, if it's Dylan, please click yes. If it's Bethany, please click no. And we'll see what we come up with. That was a great question, I think, sis. And on the other hand, if it was simply Dylan texting all of the roommates in the house around or a little before 4:25 a.m. that caused them to close out that time frame of likelihood of the attacks of 4 to 4:25, then they would have said perhaps that it was the forensic download of Dylan's phone, Bethany's phone, and the other three roommates' phones. But that is not what is said here. So this makes me wonder, did Dylan, yes, in fact, contact all of the roommates, which is in contradiction to the statement of frozen shock phase? And I need to just pause and say, I am not trying to throw shade on Dylan. I don't think that she had any bad intentions in anything that she did that evening. And I feel very badly for Dylan and what she has been through. But I think that this needs to be discussed because it could be a very important piece of the puzzle. So the fact that the PCA mentions Dylan's phone and Bethany's phone, what was found on their phones that helped them to narrow down the time frame, says to me, it feels very likely that Dylan contacted all of the roommates and Bethany responded. So if that is in fact true, and Dylan contacted, and we know now that that is in fact true. This is what's up. All of the roommates and Bethany responded. That significantly changes the story regarding what we all believe we know about that part of the case and the roommates' knowledge of what happened, on a very basic level. It changes that significantly. That would mean that Bethany knew that something was amiss in the house, whether she actually did come up the stairs or not. It said that she did not, but we still do not know. But to me, this indicates, and I have a very strong feeling that this must be the case as we put all of the pieces together, that somewhere around 4:15, 4:25 a.m., Bethany knew that something was very wrong in that house as well. So to me, this expands the question of not just why didn't Dylan contact 911? Why didn't Bethany or Dylan call 911? I feel like with this case, as we go along, questions always become more complicated rather than just answered, set aside, or simplified. Please leave a comment and let me know what you guys think about that. I'm so interested to hear what y'all think about that. So I personally don't just pick up kind of the topic of the day or the thing that people are speculating about at the moment and talk about it on this channel. In fact, I intentionally do not do that, but I think there is something significant here. So as I was thinking about all of this, I just want to read this comment from McJay. I think that this is so important. I 100% agree with you, McJay. McJay says, whatever Bethany has to say is so critical to someone or something, or perhaps to solving this case, Liz, you're saying, that they are very determined to make sure it's always redacted heavily if it involves her. I 100% agree with you, McJay. And I think what she has to say is just going to freaking blow people away, and it's going to blow this case open undeniably, along with all of the cell phone evidence and everything else we've been talking about. But really good call on that. Yeah. Remembered something that I had put in the back of my memory and I had almost forgot, which was surprising to me because of how I feel about the Chapin family and Ethan's circle of friends. Do you all remember way back when in February this was reported? Here's a headline. It says, family of Idaho murder victim Ethan Chapin questioned why surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen didn't call the cops after hearing crying and screaming, and claims she called all of the girls in the house rather than 911. Now, guys, this came out really, really early. So this was somebody who posted on Reddit, who was a verified Reddit user, who is Ethan Chapin's sister-in-law. And yes, Ethan Chapin does have a sister-in-law. I'm not sure if I explained it in this video, but I went through his whole family tree because he has half siblings that are his father Jim's children that do not have the same mother as he does, who is Stacy Chapin. Okay, so that's who this was. And this came out wicked early. So the claim here that is made by some members of the Chapin family is very much in line with what Christy Goncalves said to the Drunk Turkey Show, that, well, the simple fact that Dylan Mortensen called all of the roommates because she was alarmed, she was scared. I'm not sure what the word is because we don't know too many details about how she was feeling truly. All we've heard is frozen shock phase, which I'm really, really starting to question at this point. This report regarding, I just want to understand it better. I can't wait to hear her testimony. What the Chapins were questioning corroborates what Christy Goncalves said just 4 weeks ago. A family member of murdered University of Idaho student Ethan Chapin has questioned why the roommates who survived the slayings did not call the police. An account believed to be belonging to Ethan's sister-in-law made several posts online before the arrest affidavit was unsealed for the suspected quadruple murders. The court document detailed how surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen came face to face with a masked man on the night of the murders. Ethan's sister-in-law has since revealed that Dylan, who was in the property at the time of the killings along with Bethany Funk, and this is going to be a direct quote from the Reddit post where Reddit supposedly verified the identity of the poster as being who she claimed to be and the sister-in-law of Ethan Chapin. The post says, Dylan supposedly called all of the girls in the house after the crying and screaming stopped and no one answered, and she still didn't call the police. She needs to explain herself and her actions. When she was questioned about who called the police, she added, 911 caller was the friend who went to the house because Dylan called him to come over because she was scared from what she heard in the night. She goes on to say, he went to Xana and Ethan's room first, then called 911. Why Dylan or Bethany didn't call the police once is the question. Now, I do want to say that this report is completely consistent with what the two University of Idaho fraternity brothers of Ethan Chapin have told me for the past 7 months. Now, this article goes on to talk about another point that I want to raise here in this video. It says, Mortensen told cops she was awoken at around 4 a.m. by what sounded like victim Kaylee Goncalves playing with her dog.
Not be provided by
oh crap, I'll get right back to it. I just want to read this from Angel. Angel says, I remember a statement from Hunter Chapin saying that they know more than they can say, and he wished he could say more, but he won't because he wants justice for Ethan. Speculation. And then Angel said she couldn't find it again. Yes, that was Hunter Chapin. He did, in fact, make that statement. I know that for 100% certain. So yes, that is accurate, my dear. Let's see, where were we here? Rather than 911. So the claim here that is made by some members of the Chapin family is very much in line with what Christy Goncalves said to the Drunk Turkey Show, that, well, the simple fact that Dylan Mortensen called all of the roommates because she was alarmed. She was scared. I'm not sure what the word is because we don't know too many details about how she was feeling truly. All we've heard is frozen shock phase, which I'm really, really starting to. Okay, we're a little ahead of this. Let's see. Sorry. Belonging to Ethan's sister-in-law made several posts online detailed how surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen came face to face with a masked man on the night of the murders. Ethan's sister-in-law has since revealed that Dylan, who was in the property at the time of the killings along with Bethany Funk, and this is going to be a direct quote from the Reddit post where Reddit supposedly verified the identity of the poster as being who she claimed to be and the sister-in-law of Ethan Chapin. The post says, Dylan supposedly called all of the girls in the house after the crying and screaming stopped, and no one answered, and she still didn't call the police. She needs to explain herself and her actions. When she was questioned about who called the police, she added, 911 caller was the friend who went to the house because Dylan called him to come over because she was scared from what she heard in the night. She goes on to say, he went to Xana and Ethan's room first, then called 911. Why Dylan or Bethany didn't call the police once is the question. Now, I do want to say that this report is completely consistent with what the two University of Idaho fraternity brothers of Ethan Chapin have told me for the past 7 months. Now, this article goes on to talk about another point that I want to raise here in this video. It says, Mortensen told cops she was awoken at around 4 a.m. by what sounded like victim Kaylee Goncalves playing with her dog in a third-floor bedroom. She says she looked out of her room but didn't see anything, looking again on the second occasion when she thought she heard Xana Kernodle was crying. Mortensen stated she opened the door for the third time after she heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. The man moved towards her, she said, but she remained in a frozen shock phase as he continued past her, but let her survive. Okay, guys, I want to then refer to one small paragraph in the probable cause affidavit that says, at approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera located at At approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera located at 1112 King Road, a residence immediately to the northwest of 1122 King Road, picked up a distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17 a.m. The security camera is less than 50 feet from the west wall of Kernodle's bedroom. Okay, So a dog started barking and was heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17 a.m. So we know that Murphy, Kaylee's dog, was found in Kaylee's bedroom, and we know that Maddie and Kaylee were in Maddie's bedroom. So if you're looking at the house from an outside perspective here, Xana's bedroom is all the way over here. Kaylee and Maddie are upstairs here on the 3rd floor, and Dylan is directly beneath them on the main or 2nd floor. Now, as we look at this 3D walkthrough of the inside of the King Road residence, we see that Dylan's bedroom is directly, exactly beneath Maddie's bedroom. Like Maddie's bed is on top of Dylan's bed, essentially. You see here, it's just a straight drop down. So now let's consider how close in proximity these attacks were happening to where Dylan was in her bedroom. Is it possible she didn't hear more than was disclosed in the PCA? I honestly do not think that is humanly, earthly possible. Now, also take into consideration that Kaylee's dog Murphy started barking and barked continuously beginning at 4:17 a.m. We know that Dylan was up around 4 a.m. She heard what she heard. She saw what she saw, that which we know through the PCA. She certainly didn't just fall back to sleep. There's no way that happened. I don't think that's physiologically possible. So when we put all of this together, everything we know that was seen and heard, plus the idea that the dog is barking right upstairs, right over Dylan's bedroom. And now I believe I know that there were phone calls being made or texts being made to all of the roommates, and that there was correspondence between Dylan and Bethany around, 4:15, 4:25, I'm estimating. And the dog is barking like crazy. Guys, this is starting to paint a picture of complete chaos in that house at that time. Now, remember, a murderer was just in and out of the house. The DoorDash was just dropped off. Xana had just gone to get the DoorDash. It's not like this attack occurred. Dylan peeked outside of her door 3 times, went back in, closed it, locked it, and was like, ooh, and went back to bed, and all was quiet. No, guys. The picture that we now can see from what we know paints a very chaotic scene that must have had some significant noise going on. So what's up with that? I mean, I'm finding it hard to believe even now that Bethany wasn't completely aware of all of the chaos. Well, and now we do know from my sources at the University of Idaho that Bethany was aware of a lot of it. Remember, this video I put out a while ago, but I think it is still important information, very important information. It's all going to be critical in trial. Chaos that was going on. I really believe that she was communicating with Dylan in those late or early morning hours. And I'm not sure what to make of the rest of this. I have a lot of thinking and some more research to do on this for sure. And what I want to know most is what you guys think. Please leave a comment and let us know what you think. We all want to know what you think. And I really want to know what you think on this one. Okay, so there's that. So let's see. Welcome. Which she's college houses like this are loud and chaotic all through the night. Yes. People wear earplugs and headphones to sleep. Good point. Yes, very good point. Nancy Drew says, hi guys. Welcome if you're just coming in. All of you, I'm so glad you're here. Please take a moment to hit like. I'd appreciate it. The house was large and on several different levels. In fact, it was 2 totally separate structures, essentially, right? Whoops, I just lost the comment. Let me go back up. It was very unusual configuration. It is good to see a picture of the house from the outside because it is a very unusually shaped house. Yes, it was 2 totally different constructions. Just throwing that. No, that's important. That's a really good point. Yeah. Chick Tracy agrees with you too. Angel D says, they must have heard everything. Maybe they didn't realize. Your first thought isn't going to be 4 friends are unalive by a knife attack. Seriously. I mean, you can't even, God, even when you know that's reality, that's part of the shock. You can't get your head around it. Nobody can. The normal human mind is not designed to digest that simply. Yeah, their innocence certainly was shattered, Nancy Drew. PKC says, in my opinion, I don't think she knew for sure that he left by the PCA. Law enforcement assumed that he left due to the latent print, right? Not that she had seen him leave. That's a really important point. I agree with you. Yeah. Oh, Giovanni's Pikachu and welcome. How are you doing, my friend? Nice to see you. Says, see all their personalities in these clips for the first time. Hit me hard. Yeah. I mean, gosh, we can never forget the humanity of these tragedies that we talk about in the, true crime world. I mean, that's why we were talking about them, because they are such horrible, horrible, horrible tragedies. I can never think of a strong enough word. I need to make up my own vocabulary to speak appropriately about this. I sometimes just feel like any word I can use fails the actual vibe of it. But we so badly want justice for these victims and for their families and for all of society. Let me see where we are on that poll that asks, which roommate are you most eager to hear from during the upcoming 2025 summer of 2025 start date trial that was just announced? Is it Dylan or Bethany? So 65% of you hit yes, indicating you're more eager to hear from Dylan. And 29% of you said Bethany. 65% said Dylan. 29% said Bethany. I just put this up a few minutes ago. Everybody go vote. There's only 49 votes. And somebody said who? Yeah. So looks like so far it's mostly Dylan. But I think in part that's because we know more about what Dylan knows, what she saw, what her experience was, and therefore what she is likely to testify to during trial, or the pieces of the puzzle that she might put together for us. With, as McJay was saying, kind of in part, and making some other good points too, that with Bethany, that's a total mystery to us. Well, not total, but a large mystery. Mm-hmm. Yeah, vicious and horrific are good words. Jethro Tull, I try to not talk politics here. Just, you know why? Because if you're an American, especially during election season, you need a freaking break from it. So no politics, please. But thank you for expressing your opinion. What is this case? It's a case of the 4 murdered University of Idaho students from back in 2022. Wait, 23 I'm just getting confused here. Yeah, it was 2022, November 13th, 2022. Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. And it is Bryank Kohberger, the University of Washington doctoral degree student and candidate studying criminology, who is standing trial for the commission of these crimes. Let's see. This case is one trial I won't miss. Oh no, we will be there every moment. I'm actually a little bit glad it's happening during summer, because during summer, I'm all YouTube now. No more summer behavioral therapist duties for me. I'm just focusing on YouTube and my kid and my other things I have to do. Because my job's intense during when school's in session. So it's good to have that little break. So we'll be able to cover it very closely when it does go down. Chick Tracy says, yeah, even Murphy would be used to strangers being in and out of the house. Yeah, it definitely was it was a house that was not a stranger to strangers, right? Yes, always remembering the victims. Welcome, Stormcat. How are you doing? Oh, Keschick says, for us Australians, we have a lot of Australian friends here. A lot of our moderators are Australians. Everybody also would say thank you to the moderators. They're amazing. For us Australians, trials are on all in our during the nighttime. Yeah, right. That's okay. We'll catch up. Love you back, Angel. I'm glad you're back and you're not mad at me anymore. I'm sorry for whatever I did that hurt your feelings. I didn't mean to. It's also known as the Bryank Kohberger case. Yeah. You know, I get torn about how I want to call the case because I don't want to just give it the generic like IDAHO4 name, but there has to be a succinct way to call things verbally. But then I don't want to say Bryank Kohberger because I don't want to, you know, preference him over the victim. So it's, you know, Idaho versus Bryank Kohberger, but we will call it a number of things, none of them meant to be disrespectful or anything like that. So let's see, I'm going to close up that poll. So we have 53 votes in, and the question is, which roommate are you most eager to hear from during the 2025 summer start date trial? And 64% of you say Dylan Mortensen, and 29% of you say Bethany. And oh boy, all I know is everything that we hear from either of them and both of them is going to be edge of your seat, absolutely compelling. I mean, it's going to be intense. It's going to be intense. Oh, I was sassy. Okay. I wasn't sure if you're being serious or not. You know, sometimes, you know, it's hard when I don't get to see how everyone reacts to everything I say. I don't want to accidentally like upset someone. You think Idaho works? Okay, IDAHO4 works. Okay. I want all the phone activity of the roommates or phone activity is going to be huge. And I think we're going to be privy to it all because it's going to all have to be in discovery, and anything that's in discovery, we can get our hot little hands on unless it's redacted. But if it comes out in the trial, you know, it's going to be public knowledge. Yeah, it is definitely frustrating how much trials get drug out. That's for sure. So what else is, I'm going to just put the link to chat. If anybody wants to come up and say something, I'm going to be wrapping up soon because we've been over 2 hours here. But I was going to try to keep it to 90 minutes tonight, but I'm never able to do that. I just want to play you that last little video that I had put together because I think that those pieces of information are really so critical. And there are things that people question me all the time and you talk about all the time, or maybe people question you, but I just know is like this channel, you know, is this true? Is this accurate? So I just kind of want to get us all sort of on the same factual page as we embark back into the discussion and sort of coverage of issues of this trial. So yeah. No death threats necessary though. Kohbergers don't need them, not accepting them this time. Thank you, Angel. I appreciate that. Thank you. I just thought this, you know, I was talking with Jay earlier, just saying, oh, there's mixed reviews about the Howard Blum book. And I said, I'm not a huge fan of it either, but it was just, you know, a good thing that some people are talking about to give us like kind of an entry point into discussing this case again. And, the part 2 of the recent Watts video I put out, a lot of you have been asking when it's coming out, and thank you for watching it. I appreciate it. I was planning on, I told many of you I was going to drop it tonight, and I just had some things going on that didn't have to do with YouTube, family stuff. And then I ended up doing this, and I had to read I wanted to read the Howard Blum book before this live stream because I thought there was going to be more to discuss, quite frankly. I don't want to say it was a waste of time, because it wasn't a waste of time, but it wasn't what I expected, you know, but it'll be coming out tomorrow or the next day. Maybe not the next day because that would be the 4th of July here in the United States, which I learned. I remember last year I posted a video on the 4th of July and it should have been a good video and went, wah, 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 wah. Not the greatest day to post the YouTube videos, but it'll be coming out in the next couple of days. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate that. She says, appreciate and love your channel. Thanks. I appreciate you too, Heather. Thank you for being here. Her page deserves so much more likes and views. Give it a like. Yeah, give this video a like. I would very much appreciate that. Ooh, and you know, y'all, if you're interested, again, I encourage you to watch the Bryank Kohberger documentary that I had put together that not a lot of people watched. It's not just because I made it, but as people are asking questions about, because I always plug other creators' material too, because I like to support other creators. But I think only like 7,000 people watched it. And I really did labor in putting this together to be factually accurate and like inclusive of all the information you would want to know. So I do encourage you to give it a view and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear what you think because I didn't get enough feedback about this one. It's always a weird thing as a YouTube creator. Sometimes you make videos and you're like, no one's going to watch this or nobody's going to care, you know. Sometimes you make videos thinking, oh, I think people will be really interested in this. I'm going to put my all into it. I'm going to, you know, it's going to be the best work I can do. And then you're like, oh, no one watched it. It's all part of the duty. If you want to call it a duty, part of the gig. There's a link for that. Did I ever put the link to panel like I said I was going to? You guys are probably all too tired. Yeah, I did. Okay. McG says there is a bit of controversy with Nancy N. You mean our Nancy N? 4-minute video on this book, or do you mean Nancy Grace? Are you talking Nancy N? Is she here? Are you talking about Nancy Grace's 4-minute video, McJ? Because I almost played that. There is a 4-minute video. Oh, all right. Let's finish up by watching that because I watched that earlier. Yeah, let's watch that 4-minute video if it's still up. I think it is. Just got to find it here. Yeah, it was one just came out a few days ago, right? Well, that's the one we're playing. I hope that's one you're talking about. Let's see here. So many clicks. So many clicks. Share. Big play.
Early on, we heard Kelly Goncalves' parents speaking out, stating she was the target. And I understand that because her wounds were so much more heinous than Maddie's. But according to this new bombshell theory, Maddie was in fact the target. Also, we are learning from Howard Blum's new book, When the Night Comes Falling, that there is blood evidence that Ethan Chapin jumped up.
This is what I was talking about earlier, that I feel this bit was just included in the book to be sensationalized, and I was really disgusted by it. In fact, I didn't realize that was what was in this 4-minute video because I went double speed through several of her videos and others today as I was also reading the book. I was full of a lot of Howard Blum today. It wasn't super enjoyable, really, to be honest, but this really turned me off. I don't like it at all.
And confronted Bryank Kohberger to protect his sweetheart, Xana Kernodle. To Howard Blum, I know that you have researched this so much that it's may have become, SOP to you, but to us, the revelations that you make in your book are, let me just say, illuminating. Tell me the facts that support your theory that Ethan was stabbed as he was trying to protect Xana, and that after he attacked Ethan, he goes and says, "Don't worry, I'm here to help you," to Xana, and then kills her. What facts support your theory?
Ethan coming up to confront Kohberger was testimony that was made to the grand jury. There's also evidence in the coroner's report that was shared at the grand jury that he was killed with one massive cut to his neck that caught his jugular vein. Has to Xana speaking out, first saying there's someone here, and then the assailant saying, Don't worry, I've come to help you. That's in the police documents. I think that's arguably one of the most chilling parts of this entire night. The suspect approaching Xana and saying, "Don't worry, I've come to help you." I think that shows his maliciousness, his total commitment to the crime and to taking this victim and to making sure that anyone who encounters him is not going to live.
I'm looking at a picture right now of Ethan and Xana, and you go into each of the victims' backgrounds painstakingly. And Xana had just an upsetting background as a child. Both of her parents had been in and out of jail. And what does she do? She survives. She works harder and harder and harder. She's taken in by her aunt. And she is victorious against all odds. And I am just imagining Joe Scott Morgan, her lying there in bed with her sweetheart, Ethan. And, you know, I think you were with us at some point at CrimeCon before last, Joe Scott, when I finally got to meet Ethan's mom, who is just amazing. No, you were not with us. But then later when you were speaking, she stood up and started talking and during your address. And what a woman, the strength that mom had. She just remembering her and what she said to me at CrimeCon still strikes me to this day. To you, Joe Scott, regarding the evidence, the blood spatter,
McJay says, some take issue with how Nancy Grace is presenting the info from this book as fact. I take issue with it too. I actually heard about this book being out from a Nancy Grace clip on autoplay or something. And I was like, oh, you know, kind of rang in my ears. I was like, got to read that straight away. And yeah, I wanted, you know, I kind of have been leaking my thoughts on it all along, but I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to be exposed to the content first of what's in the book. But yeah, I think it's a real mischaracterization. And I'm wondering why the emphatic endorsement for such kind of a lame, I don't know, such a wet noodle of a book. I don't know. It's a little weird.
blood trail, the blood transfers, and what Howard Blum is saying. I want to merge those. Because if I were telling this to a jury, I would have to describe what Howard Blum says about how Kohberger comes into the room and he is confronted by Ethan to protect his sweetheart, Xana. Ethan is murdered by a slicing stab to the jugular. And then the killer, as Ethan crumples to the ground, moves forward to his next target, Xana Kernodle. And she's afraid. And he says, "Don't worry, I'm here to help you."
Huh. Oh, that's interesting. Hey, American Princess, how are you? American Princess says, to Angel, on Amazon, the Kindle version, audiobook, and hardcover are under different sections. That's bizarre. Like what, fact, fiction, and BS? No, I'm sorry. That's weird. Yes. And it was so profound when Mrs. Chapin took the mic. And I've been so disgusted by the way people have had hatred for the Chapin family. They are just absolutely beautiful, beautiful people. And, you know, of course, not everybody might live a lifestyle or use the kind of language or the, you know, speak in the way that you would. But, you know, as I say often, we are all more the same than we are different when it comes down to it. And such is true between any of us and any member of the Chapin family. And these people are just beautiful people who are suffering a great loss. And especially there's been some creators who've just come out nasty about them. I mean, freaking nasty, unwarranted. I mean, I usually will reserve my opinions, but people, you know, I believe in freedom of speech and you can create what you want and believe what you want. And I certainly believe that, whether I think it's in good taste or not is another story, but I will speak out against that because it's just disgusting. It's disgusting. I am disgusted. Official word. Thank you. Thank you, Stormcat. Yeah, I know. It's just, I just can't understand. I mean, it makes me, it really, this one really gets at my heart. Giovanni Pikachu just said, I realize I'm a hardcore hate watcher of Nancy. That's funny. Well, the first step is acknowledging it, right? So it's okay. We'll support you. We'll support you through that. Giovanni's Pikachu. Everyone grieves differently. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? Even if there were something to truly be disgusted about that family or hate them the way that some people apparently do, and shame on all of you if you're listening, I just want to say, even if that did exist and that does not exist, cut them a fucking break. My God, look at what they've been through. Like, what is wrong with people? Like, what's wrong with your hearts? Why are they sour and rotten and crumbling with mold? She does sometimes get on your nerves. That's legitimate. I can understand. I don't feel that way about her, but I understand why. I see that aspect of her personality that I know can get on nerves. And if that personality I encountered in a different context, I just happen to have a lot of love for the Chapins because of things, I get that, and that's totally legitimate. But the way people have just directed their nastiness, oh, yeah. Yeah, I understand. I understand how the personality we see from her can come off as being abrasive. I certainly do see that, but yeah, don't take your hate out of context. We won't. Angel D says, I really think, that's good, McJay. I really think some YouTube creators get caught up in content creating and forget these are real people. Yeah, I think so too. But then I ask myself, as being somebody who creates content, like, how do you let that happen? Like, what makes you not willing or able or conscientious enough to check in with yourself during the whole process of creating a video? It's not easy. Like, it's like creating videos is a shitload of work. It really, truly is. Like, you can't check in a couple times and do a little like temperature check and make sure you're not just being an asshole, but I agree. Yeah. McJay says you have to put an I am disgusted on merch. Yes, I think that's a good idea. See. Oh, Anaphylaxis. Okay, now you're talking about Nancy Grace. I don't know if you guys are talking about Chapin or Nancy Grace or who. Okay. Anaphylaxis says Nancy Grace and I are very different. I'm reserved while she is quite dramatic. She is very dramatic. I imagine she's a very good attorney. I used to freaking couldn't stand that woman. And then I really loved her. And then I've kind of just been, it's situational with her for me. Yeah, please do take a moment to hit thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And so I think I'm going to end this at 2.5 hours because it's been a while. But I'm so glad to see all of you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much, moderators, subscribers, members, people that are just stopping by. Go ahead, hit subscribe. We definitely want you to come back, and I hope you want to come back too. And upcoming this week, I'm going to do a couple more lives this week. I'm going to do probably Watts, sorry, moderators, and then also a live stream on the Madeline Soto case, Stefan Stearns. Tough stuff, I know, but I know a lot of you want to talk about it. I've been following it. I've made very little content on it. I haven't done a live stream yet, so I'm going to try that out, see how it goes. If you're interested in that case, I'll try to give it an interesting spin so it's a little bit different than the other content that might be out there. I have some videos that are going to be dropping too, and just stay tuned. If you don't get the notifications and you want to be on the email list for when I am going to go live, maybe a day before, usually more like hours before, sometimes minutes before, but usually it's in the hours range. I send out an email letting you know, hey, here's a link to live stream. It's going to be happening. I would never use your email for any other reason than that. You can send me an email to wattsobsession@gmail.com. That's important. It's just wattsobsession@gmail.com. In the subject, put something like add to notification or something like that. All capitals. So I see it, and then I'll add you to the list. So you'll get a notification directly from me. And yeah, so everybody, I'm not going to tell you lock your windows or doors anymore because we've had controversy about that, but just be aware of what's going on around you. And just remember, life is hard for me, for you, and for Stacey Chapin. So please be nice to each other. And most of all, be good to yourself because you deserve it. All of you do. Hope you enjoyed your hot cocoa. Jody is cool because you deserve it too. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for being here. And I hope to see you really soon. See, tomorrow is, I think I'm going to probably do a live stream tomorrow night because I'm not going to do one on the evening of the 4th of July for said reasons. So probably be a live stream tomorrow night around the same bat time, same bat channel. I'm going to play a little outro kind of thing so you guys can wrap up your chat, and everybody have a good night. I love you and appreciate y'all. Take care.
There are more answers than you know.
I'm so sorry. So long ago, I wanted to say, Jen, thank you so much for gifting 5 memberships. I'm sorry. I just started something when I saw that. That was from a long time ago. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So 5 new members. Awesome. Welcome, guys. I have been putting out a little bit of members only content this summer. It's one of my things. I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
There are more answers.